Welcome to the Eddie Network podcast. I'm your host, Ed Reniger. My guest today is John Morley. He's a friend from a while back, and every time we have talked, it has been an electric, sterling, very interesting conversation. Today's is no different, and it's difficult to nail it down to a specific topic. We cover a lot of territory, and yet we are very, very in sync in what we think. I think you're going to enjoy this. You're going to gain some perspective that may be helpful to you, and if so, then you should be in touch. So, without further ado, here's my conversation with John Morley. So,
Boy, gonna go come full circle.
yeah, so you staying busy?
I am. It's kind of it's a funny time, right? So but yeah, staying busy. It's every year, these last few years, every single one of these years has been different. This year is definitely carving its own path. It's
How I know you live in Silicon Valley, so how are you really dependent upon the the health of the tech industry for your livelihood?
uh no, I would almost say not at all because I thought that I would be,
Yeah.
but for whatever reason, none of the interest that surfaces for me comes out of tech. Which
Yeah.
I assumed at the start because I learned what I know how to do in the tech space that this would be where it would apply, and it's not typically where it applies. So that's always interesting.
Well, it's interesting. Earlier this week, I interviewed a guy from Microsoft who runs Microsoft Garage, and it was really fascinating talking to him. And it's a world that
Sure.
I don't under, it's not that I don't understand it. I understand it, but it's not a world that I'm familiar with. And but it's so oriented around innovation and hackership and things like that. It's really fascinating. So,
Yeah, it's yeah, absolutely. And Microsoft remains such an interesting company. I mean, for a big organization, I get a sense they're actually pretty good at transformation. They transform themselves pretty regularly, you know.
well, that's what I picked up with his name was Ed Essay, and that's what I picked up from him was that their DNA is we're not going to stay put. We're going to keep changing, and 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 I celebrate that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
yeah,
it's kind of it, it's interesting because if you go back 10, 15 years, they had a reputation for being a little bit on the dinosaur scale, you know. They were but no, they've chopped and changed themselves
and
many
based on
times.
what he was saying, that it really is attributable to the CEO that they have now.
Mm,
I can't remember what his name is, but um,
Satya, yeah.
Satella or something like that.
Satya Nadella, yeah.
Yeah, and that he's very committed to changing things, never letting anything kind of stay put, and that's unusual. That's so unusual. I mean, it's a common conversation for me with people about why do people not change when they know they need to, and why do businesses not change when they know they need to?
Too.
The problems are obvious, they're right there before them, but no, we're not going to do anything.
About it. Yeah. I sense I haven't done a lot with Microsoft over the years, but anytime I did engage with them, I would say the two things that would stand out for me with them was one was practicality. They were usually fairly practical. Um, and sometimes I think that lends itself to uh, adaptability better than the visionaries
Yeah.
because you follow what's 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 practical to do, you know.
Well,
That's
we were talking about AI, and he said we were very intentional about naming our AI thing Copilot because we wanted to send the message that the AI is not doesn't work on its own. It's really something. It joins with the human factor, and they work together. And that's really an unusual. That's not
yeah.
that's not what you get from a lot of these places. So
Yeah, that's a smart name. It's good. It's a good name. Um, that's one I haven't used actually. I've used lots of them, but I haven't used Copilot. So
it is. I like that. So and I'm not really oriented towards using AI because I like to do my own research. I like to do my own digging, but I'm more likely to use a Copilot just simply because of that kind of embedded philosophy of mutuality there.
yeah, yeah. I think a little bit too is, are you being supported or are you being hacked? I think that's one of the questions I was mindful of with the AI tools is I mean they're all feeding off whatever we give them, but at the same time,
Yeah.
I've noticed if I hop on YouTube, my YouTube search looks incredibly like what I last entered on some of the more popular AI tools, so that gets interesting.
Yeah, I see that on YouTube, yeah, as well, and it's not even something I've searched for, but it's something I've had a conversation about, and
Yes.
they picked it up orally.
Yeah.
And,
Straight away, yeah.
oh, okay, well, um, you know, this is the way it is. This is what
Yeah.
we deal with now. Yeah, just have to be careful.
Yeah, 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 yeah. So how have you been?
Um, I'm doing the best I've been in about 2 years right now.
Fantastic.
And as I had some health issues that descended upon me actually beginning 4 years ago, but it really became significant in 2023. Um, so I lost hearing in this ear, and with that came vertigo, and
Oh, yeah.
vertigo kind of went away, but the loss of balance didn't. And so, I have to stand up and I have to steady myself because if I stand up and begin to move, I'm going to fall off to the right. I'm going to stumble to the right. I'm going to fall.
Wow.
Um, and then my left hip had to be replaced last year.
Yeah, well,
That was I went through about 9 months of real serious pain, and I was away from home during a third of that time. So I was actually in Wyoming for 3 months working. So and it was one of those strange things where it's multiple things that are going on. I would stand up and my feet would go numb, and then my legs would go numb, and I'd have to sit down. And as soon as I sat down, um, I could feel my legs, my feet again. So there was something in my buttocks that was causing a nerve to be constricted or something, and so I had to be careful. And there was one instance where I was standing, and there was a group of us, and then I said to the two guys standing next to me, says, "Catch me," because I was falling, and they caught me by the elbows and dragged me over to a seat, and I sat down, and within a minute, I was fine.
yeah, wow.
But once I had the hip surgery, which is not connected to this at all, I was fine, and I haven't had that recurrence. So
Good.
it doesn't make any sense. And I
Yeah.
also had
Thank
a
God.
what they call a gamma knife surgery on my head to zap the tumor that's in my inner ear so that it would stop. It wasn't cancerous, but it would stop growing. So that was interesting.
Yeah.
And that took me about 6 months to get over. And so that was back in October when I did that, and I really didn't feel my back to where I wanted to be until May. And
Okay,
then
but you're back now.
yeah, and then I took off and did a 3.5 week trip out to Wyoming and back. And so
Nice. So they've rebuilt you for the next 20 years.
I would like to think so. And but I also took a sabbatical beginning in March, and I did a 4 month sabbatical where I stopped writing and I stopped most of my social media stuff. Other than I just kept the podcast going, but and and so I've got a whole new direction as to what I'm doing, and I'm writing a novel,
Oh, very good. Oh, that's
and I'm going to write
makes sense.
a parallel book with all the research that I'm doing for the novel.
Very good. What, any hints on style or direction in the novel?
Oh yeah, yeah. So the thing that had begun to emerge in my mind last winter was the question of time in reality, and feeling like, we're trapped in this kind of vortex of the present just constantly being repeated and without any sense that there's anything that is based on it in the past or anything that is to result from it in the future. It's just this kind of Nietzschean eternal recurrence of everything. And so I started reading about time, and uh, it's interesting. So I read uh, T.S. Eliot's Four Quartets,
Uh-huh. Yeah, I have those here somewhere.
and I've read Sound and Fury. Well, Faulkner's Sound and the Fury twice during this time. Been reading Shakespeare. I've gone to literary sort of,
Yeah.
and so the novel is going to be called The Simulacra of Time, and it's about a young man who, well, the first chapter, he is the youngest of six children in a family, and when he's three, and he's the youngest, and the next youngest is 6 years older than him, and when he's three, his parents are killed in a plane crash, and so his father's parents, his grandparents, take the six of them in, and the grandfather, who is a military veteran, 40 years, fought in both the First and Second World Wars, decides that Robert, who is the kid's name, he's going to be his charge, and he's going to train this kid to be a man, to be adult, and to deal with the world. And so that's the background. That the first chapter takes place as the kid goes off to college. And he has a philosophy professor. He has a philosophy course, and in the first day of the class, the professor says, there is no past nor future, only the now. Everything that once was considered in time has vanished into simulation." And the
Wow.
boy doesn't know what that means.
And yeah. What was your T.S. Eliot
Yeah, well,
a little
that's
bit there?
where the inspiration comes up. And so he goes home during the first semester, and he talks to his grandfather. So, grandfather, what does this mean? And the grandfather's taught him all kinds of things like how to camp and how to use a map and compass. He's taught him how to deal with the real world, the physical world. And the boy knows that there's something that this professor is saying that is important, but he doesn't understand what it is. And his grandfather, he tells his grandfather what the professor has said, and and the grandfather tells the boy, says, "I want you to ask your professor what he loves." And this is where I'm going with this whole story. And so the kid goes back to campus, and he goes sees this professor, and he says, "My grandfather wants to know what you love." And he says, "Well, I'm not going to answer that question. If he wants to ask me that, let him come to me here in my office, and I'll be glad to answer it."
Ah,
He says, "But so what is the question you want to ask?" and the boy doesn't know what the question is because he's now caught between these two influential men. His grandfather, who is the archetype of reality, and his professor, who is the archetype of postmodern simulations. And these two influences are pressing in on him. And the question is, how does he then live the rest of his life where these two things are pressing in on him and he has to make a decision how to live? So, so the stories will emerge from the question of reality and the simulation, the reality or the spectacle, the real, which I've written about. And so it's a lot of fun.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. You're reminding me, not reminding me, evoking is probably a better word. A little Cormac McCarthy for me there. You'd,
yeah.
oh, there you good. I, oh yeah, well, there you go. That's a classic.
Particularly the end of when the two old law enforcement guys, their uncle and nephew, you're talking about not being able to deal with the world as it is today, and
Yeah.
that being, I'm not matched. I don't feel like I can match what's going on, and that's a reflection of time passing, and we don't grow or change to meet the demands of the time.
The I love that book and the movie's great. Tommy Lee Jones is fabulous in that movie.
Yeah.
He has two other books that I absolutely love, and there's a trilogy that starts with All the Pretty Horses, and All the Pretty Horses was okay, but the second two novels, one is called The Cities of the Plain, and then the third one, whose name escapes me, but those two are phenomenal. Cities of the Plain is set in the late 40s or 50s, and it's about a young cowboy uh, whose land straddles both the US and Mexico. But of course, after the war, where the border became much more of a thing, he realizes, well, he's lost half of it to the Mexicans, and the oil companies and the military are sniffing around the other half. Um, but it's a whole love story in there, and it's about being constrained when your will is to actually move across the space. But
which,
that's a
which
good
is
read too if you haven't read it.
which is such a contemporary problem for all of us,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and nobody who is a public figure can talk about it because they don't know what to say. Because in some cases they're the author of this kind of conflict that we face.
Yeah,
In many cases, and in other cases,
I know. In fact,
but they don't know what to do with it.
yeah. Well, our systems are out of date, so we're churning up problems because we're trying to solve them with things that don't work anymore. So that's my
I think Einstein says something about that, right? He said, uh, you can't fix what you. I don't know. I forget exactly what the phrase, but he said something like, if you keep doing the same things the way you've always done, you'll get the same things you've always gotten.
mm,
And you're not going to change things by doing it the way you've always done. And this is now a recurring conversation with people in my with on the podcast, which is and that's only in the last month as I've kind of come back to starting it, and so that kind of question of, well, how do we change is a becoming a bigger and bigger question.
and it's complex, right? It's not just one thing. Um, I remember there's a futurist writer that I really like, Stephen Johnson, and he wrote his I think it got picked up as a show on PBS way back, but he had a book called Where Do Good Ideas Come From? And
Huh.
he's written a few of these different kind of books. The latest one that I'm familiar with is probably from about 5 or 6 years ago, and it was about how the things that we play with become the things that we end up working with. So that a lot of new ways of working or interacting actually start as games. And so he wrote about that. But he around 2010 wrote a book called Future Perfect, which was I think the subtitle on it was The Case for a Networked World. Um, and he went and gave a talk, and I asked him about Future Perfect. There's a great story at the start of Future Perfect where he opens it up. It was when Captain Sully landed the plane on the Hudson,
Mhm.
and he's interviewed the next day on one of the TV shows, and they say, "Oh, Captain Sully, you're a hero." And he goes, "No, I'm not a hero." He said, "This thing plan it ran out the way it was planned." And they were kind of looking at him. He goes, "Listen, this." He says, "A 30-year-old engineering story around the airplane." He said, "30 years of accumulated training for the pilots and the crew." And he said, "We understood that if something like that happened, here's what you're to do." And he said, "We did it, and no heroes here." He said, "Just a well-executed plan that evolved over time as we learn more." And so he uses that as a launch pad for saying that nothing we do is, controlled by a small group of people, that it's a network, and that all parts of the network bring their passions and their skill to bear, and that if we do that effectively, then we get successful outcomes. And so he gives lots of different stories of this at work. But I was curious because this was around the time of it's probably actually the time of the election back in 2016. So it's maybe 10 years ago almost. And I asked him, what did he see looking out? And he said, well, one of the things he was really curious about was he felt that people, for instance, living in Shanghai or Tokyo or New York or London or Paris, um, had more in common with each other than maybe, let's say, people in, I don't know, some part of the rural US with New York City. And that's so this evolving um, identity was very at odds with national structures. And that he was just curious, thinking aloud as to where that might all go. And I think that's something that's been borne out, particularly recently, so yeah, I don't know. So I kind of look at it and go, our where we go as humans doesn't necessarily map in real time with the systems we put in place for ourselves, so
Um, do you know John Flack
no, that's
or
a
Adam
make a note.
Walls or Adam Walls?
No.
They have written a book called, come on, let's get this right. Um,
Oh, do systems exist? Oh, I love that. Actually, without ever having read it, I'm gonna take a note of that. I love systems thinking, and I always have a sense that it's best viewed in the rear view mirror.
so here's the table of contents. These are the chapters, the 10 chapters.
Yeah, take a note of that. Thanks, Ed.
What they're saying is that a system is not a thing. It's an idea, basically. And and to treat it as a thing means that you're making it far too concrete and rigid and unchanging.
Yeah,
And I spent an hour and a half with him yesterday recording, and our original plan was we were going to do a video of each chapter on each chapter, but I think we're all too busy to make that happen. But it's really an interesting thing because I think um, systems are what they are,
yeah.
but they're also what people want to turn them into.
Yeah. Oh,
And and what is it they want to, and in some cases they're looking for something that is complete and whole and certain, but I don't know if there's anything like that.
I like this. By the way, that's a cheap buy. I just ordered it. It was like $10.
Well,
So that appeals to me a lot. I am working on something at the moment where I am actually the source of it. Uh, but it's not actually, if you like, it's not about me. I had a sense that there was a group of people that if we pulled them together, that something interesting might happen. And but it was purely my sense. And these people didn't know each other. So I pulled them together on a call, and it turns out, yes, there's a lot of connective tissue. Um, and what gets interesting is that I mean, it was literally a hunch I had, and then I called them together, and they came away and they go, "Yeah, there is something there." And then they look back to me, and I was like, "Well, listen, I just had the hunch." So now what we want to do is explore and see, like, what is the presenting challenge or opportunity that seems to want to kind of be introducing itself here. And so we're just exploring that at the moment, but finding, um, and I have a friend who loves to talk about serendipity. But finding that there's a lot of serendipity here. Um, and then that sense is, okay, well, what could this be? And where might it manifest itself with some value quickly? Um, so that's just a pure exploration. But I find that a lot, Ed. That defies any kind of logic of how we go about trying to develop things today in one respect. Um, but then I also think that we started off talking about tech companies. Half the reason innovations come out of tech companies is because people just talk to each other, you know.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. That's and the trick in other kinds of non-tech companies is how do you get people to talk to each other?
yeah. Or I'll go. I'll a yes, and um, I've kind of that word innovation. Like I get pretty targeted around that. To me, innovation is simply we've generated a new idea out of a new insight.
Hmm.
And we are all doing that every an ivory tower thing. It is everybody in every business is doing that every day. And then I think I always go back to that famous Donald Rumsfeld quote from the Iraq War, right? It was there are no knowns, there are known unknowns, and there are unknown unknowns. And they're your three horizons of innovation right there. Most of the things we work on are no knowns. We're just trying to make them a bit better. And then a good chunk of them are known unknowns. That's your transformation
Hmm.
journey. And the unknown unknowns, that's where we're looking 3 to 5 years out and sort of imagining what might be. And I think everybody is doing that all the time. So to cloak it in this aura of mystique and only the few is a throttling mechanism, like right there. Um, I feel like pretty strongly about that. Everybody you talk to in any situation has an idea about something. So
And to me, the question is not not where do they get their idea, what's it derived from, but how does it fit into the current structure of their organization? How can the structure accommodate new ideas?
and as you know, that probably has more to do with the people in the mix than it has to do with the system. You
Well,
know,
they're changing the systems, they're updating the systems all the time. But it's the you know, in some ways we're still trying to climb out of the old industrial model.
yeah,
And and I think we're more quickly climbing out of it today than we have been in my lifetime because I think we're finding now that it really is an impediment to, and while the people who have been masters of innovation and change are continue to innovate and change, those of us, not me, but those who are in those kind of legacy companies where they can't change because, well, our founder didn't, this is not the founder's values, but this is the way that, or this is the way we've always done it. So this is the way we will always continue to do it. That sort of mindset um, is kind of a predictor of decline.
I'm looking around here because I don't. Do you have a dollar bill there by any chance?
Yeah.
There's a fabulous story. I have one there. You do have one?
Yeah.
There's a fabulous story. And you might be familiar with this because I heard this from Richard Merrick. So there you go. If you flip it around the other way, you'll see on the one side you have the all-seeing eye,
Yeah. Right
and
here.
on the other side you have the constellation. And I'm gonna hold you up a book. Matthew Barzan's The Power of Giving Away Power
Hmm.
talks about the absolute contradiction at the heart of the United States kind of government, which is trying to figure out, are we the all-seeing eye or are we the constellation of interdependence? And he gives a really interesting review of how that has been an ongoing, um, I don't want to use a negative term like a clash or anything, but it's more it's just an ongoing debate whether we yield to hierarchy as being the all-seeing eye or whether we actually come together and collaborate the way the initial 13 states did, and understanding that the best way for them to achieve their own power was to give it away in terms of developing a federation. And I think right now it's a fascinating philosophical conversation because we are in a moment of absolute hierarchy in terms of our governance, um, at a time when I think the spirit is more collaborative.
Mhm.
And, as of yesterday, we have no longer funded national public radio or public broadcasting service, which I think is a crying shame, whether you agree with it or not. So to me right now would be the moment to explore social innovation, not to actually withdraw from it. And so I think we're in these kind of moments is where probably the most new things are going to emerge
I think
because we have
I think you're
certainty
right.
established on both sides. And
And it's
now
even
it's
it's
phase
even
where
more it's even more complicated than
than that.
yeah, because there are two different kinds of hierarchies, at least. You have the hierarchy of the elected, then you have the hierarchy of the appointed, who have not been elected, but they're seeking control of the planet, you know, and no one has elected them, no one has granted them, they just have taken over. But
Yeah.
that in that sense, they're much more a reflection of the old aristocracy. And that's what we
The
have.
Gilded Age.
We're still fighting. We were still fighting the War of Independence in the U.S. Between the aristocracy of England and the hierarchy of the elected here, as as it began almost 250 years ago. And then you have the hierarchy of the communal, because the people who are in the most communal, who are in most have more conversation with more people, represent another kind of hierarchy of connection, where they know what's going on. They have a and I don't think these are the people who are on social media. I think they're people who have lots of connections to lots of people who no one ever knows that they're in connection with them,
Mm. Yeah.
and
Um,
they share their ideas. I mean, but it's I spent 3.5 weeks driving across country, about 6,000 miles in the car, and I had the most amazing conversations with people.
People. Yeah.
And let me give you an example of this. So I left. I was in Cody, Wyoming. I left, and I drove to Deadwood, South Dakota, and I checked into the DoubleTree that's in a casino there. And so I'm hanging out in the casino. I'm not a gambler. I have no interest in that. But I've gone into the bar and I start talking to this guy who's probably 50, and his girlfriend, wife, I don't know, significant. I don't know what their relationship is. And and we just have this amazing conversation, and And then what's so interesting was he's describing the social environment of the world today, and then he says we have been together for 2 months now, and he says, but we haven't been physically together yet. And I said, And I turned to her and says, "Is that because you're waiting for something to appear to you that says it's time?" And she said, "Yeah." And I thought that's just brilliant that people are that self-aware that they're making decisions about what they want to do and what they don't want to do, and the people that they're in relationship with are willing to let them be that kind of circumspect in their relationships with them. I mean, but that was happening every day of having those kinds of conversations.
You can sum it up. Martin Knox. Martin Knox has this great mantra that I always love, and it's he says, "Show up, be present, tell the truth, and let it go."
Yeah, yeah,
And
that's true.
I tell you what, if you can get to there, then most things will turn out just fine. You
So,
know,
I mean, we probably haven't talked in a year.
yeah,
Um,
probably isn't that long. Yeah, yeah.
and so, say, so if you look back over the past year, what is it that you see that gives you um, a sense of hopefulness or a sense of, oh, I really like what's happening, or because it's easy for people to be critics. That's the easiest thing
Mm.
to do. But to be able to identify things, I like the trajectory of this. I like where this is going. I want to be a part of that. I want to see what that is. Are there things that you're seeing that kind of fit into that framework?
There are. I mean, they're coexistent with things that I think are very broken.
Uh-huh.
I would just, I mean, to be as simple, I think the macro level is very broken. Um, but on the micro level, meaning small groups of people on the ground chatting as we are, um, I think there's a lot of positivity there. I think no matter what your persuasion, I think most people are frustrated with the fact that things are broken. Um, And so to your point about having good conversations with people, I discovered this during the pandemic because during the pandemic, right, we had our first taste of this polarization, and I found that most people, when you were introduced online, most people were fabulous. And I retained that. I think there's some great open conversations, people willing to help each other. So I would like that to trickle up. That would be where I see positivity. I also think then this one is a strong one for me. Having been born and raised in the European Union, which is a construct largely brought around thanks to the US post World War II
Mhm.
that gave us unprecedented, um, prosperity and peace. That I think now is an opportunity for the Europeans in one sense. I don't want to use the word pay back, but it's to give back a little bit. I think I'm having some interesting conversations about some of the types of development programs that you get in the EU that you don't get here in the US and why they're beneficial and who they benefit and how they go around them. So that's been fun because when you marry that sort of conversation with the get up and go attitude that you get in the US more than anywhere else, then I think everything becomes possible. So those are the things that I'm very positive about, but they're happening on a lower level. I'm not seeing them at the higher level. So I'm trying to wean myself off reading about what's going on in the broader world because that's kind of more frustrating than anything else. But what's happening on the ground is actually more interesting and positive. That's how I would put it.
Well, that's the difference between reality and the simulation. So much of
Yeah,
what was
that's
fed
good.
is a story, and it's not a real
Yeah,
story. It's the story intended to suspend judgment, create paralysis of action, and divide us into tribal segments of the population so that we don't unify and go do things that we can do together.
yeah. You know, I'm always a great believer. It's interesting. One of the things I had to like, channel Martin's, show up, be present, tell the truth, and let it go. I think one of the biggest realizations for me, Ed, and I like your as it sinks in your reality versus the simulation. In my tech career, was the stuff that was the most fun to do and genuinely created the most impact was never the stuff that you got promoted for or recognized for or
Hmm.
got leadership support. Um, and I think what that gives me looking back in hindsight is to your sense, yes, there is the system, and then there's the way you get things done effectively. And they don't always cross over.
Hmm.
And rather than spending more and more time trying to nudge them to cross over, I'm more inclined these days to actually spend my energy where stuff is actually happening or has
Yeah,
an opportunity to happen. Um,
me too.
so
Totally
yeah,
agree. And I don't think we actually know
and
that we're in the middle of it. Sometimes we
yeah, I
start,
mean, there's challenges associated.
yeah,
Yeah, absolutely.
because I moved to my back to my hometown a year and a half ago, and and I'm still wondering why I'm here, other than I found a house to buy, and I want, it's perfect what I need, but I don't know why I'm here, and what I've concluded until I know why I'm here, I will do what I know what to do, which is I'm going to sit and think a lot, talk with people, write. Yeah, I mean, do what
Yeah.
I know what to do. And if something new comes along, I'll be ready for it. But,
I read you reminded me of something there. I read a great book recently. Actually, I had a joke. I didn't finish it because the the first half of it was just so good that I actually was almost reluctant to keep going. And so I need to give it a little time and finish it. But it's just called Notes on Complexity
I
by a
have
guy.
that.
Yeah, that's a fabulous read.
Really is.
Because you just described it, right? So just creating that space for things to emerge.
I think you represent this to me as someone who kind of moves through the world, and you're connecting with lots of people, and when they connect with you, opportunities emerge from that. That you're kind of
Absolutely.
a a source of I don't want to use entrepreneurial because that's overused, but just a source of energy that allows people to say, oh well, this makes sense. This is good. This is and out of that emerges some kind of hopefulness that that people will grasp a hold of, and they may never do anything with you, but your impact upon them has been to open up something within their own frame of reference that says, oh, well, I can go do that.
Oh, that's kind of you. Thank you. I mean, I think, well, you're describing yourself there nicely too. I think,
That's why we connect well.
yeah,
But we both do that.
I think it's a way of just looking at the world or making sense of the world. I mean, there are people who have skills I don't have, and I look at them like I don't no idea how you can do what you do. And I just show up and I, I think either through a way of looking at the world or just the way I had to work and for long years of, I always say long years of having no budget and headcount in a job makes you look around and see who's doing something exceptional that and seemingly freely that they'll give because they care, or they're good people. And so I did that for years, and then that just becomes a way of looking at the world, and I realized recently, actually, here's a quick thought for you on AI. There's there's lots of stuff I'm not good at, but one of the things I'm pretty good at, and I think you're the same, is I see patterns and possible
Hmm.
connections. With the result being that AI is a boon for that because I love jumping into one of the AI tools and going, if we take this and we take that and we take that and then throw this and a bit of that in, what am I looking at here? Because this is what I sense I'm looking at.
I'm not there yet.
We'll get you that.
I,
You're
I
resistant to it,
still,
or you?
no, I still like, for example, um, taking a book like this, and I'm going to go back and look at the resources. Who
Yeah.
they're writing about? Who's missing? I'm looking for gaps. And I'm looking for connections. And
I,
and I'm not
I'll tell
looking
you,
for answers.
I love that. I two quick things. I got a book there during the week, and it was about behavior. And I went straight to the index, and I was looking for the word intention,
Ah,
and it wasn't there.
about that.
And I was like, all right, all of a sudden I'm going, oh, I'm not sure if this book on behavior doesn't talk about intention. I'm not sure if it's going to resonate. But yeah, so that was a biggie.
There are a lot of people who are doing that hard work for us, and I'm glad for them. And it's I'm just going to continue to do what I've done because it has revealed things which I don't think show up in queries.
Yeah.
You have to know what you're looking for when you ask the question, even though you may not know the answer. And I'm looking for the incongruities. I'm looking for the things which are missing, or the things that show up that say, "Why is that there?" I'm look. That's the stuff that's really interesting to me, and that's why I like traveling because you get in the car and you stop in a place and you start you talk to people in a bar and you're going to hear things from them that say, "Wow, I never thought about that. Oh, that's really interesting." And I'm going to keep my little notepad with me. I'm going to write that down. I'm going to go do a little searching on that. Should I do an AI search? Probably, but I'm not looking for comprehensive. I'm looking for signals, little signals that say, if you walk over on the other side of that hill, you're going to find something that everybody on this side of the hill can't see yet.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
You remind me, I had a conversation with somebody during the week, and he likes his sci-fi, and he was telling me about how they measure or identify black holes, the presence of black holes. And it's simply by looking at absolutely everything that is present and looking at the behavior of things in a space,
Mhm.
and whatever we can't account for or whatever we can't see or detect will suggest whether there's a black hole present or not. So it's measuring what we can't measure,
Isn't
seeing what we can't see.
I mean,
I
to me,
love that.
it's really fascinating.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I feel like Roy Batty from the from Blade Runner, you
Oh
know,
yeah, yeah, yeah. To think, yeah,
uh, and at the very end, he has saved Harrison Ford's life. He's pulled him up out of falling to his death, and he says, um, "You people would not believe what I have seen." And then he goes through this little litany of things, and that's the way I feel. I see things that other people are not privileged to see, and it's all because I walk out the door,
yeah,
and it's the I moved into a neighborhood, for example. I didn't move into a suburban neighborhood. I didn't move into a middle class or upper middle class apartment block. I didn't move into a upper middle class neighborhood in town neighborhood. I moved into a onto a block filled with crack addicts and crack dealers and fentanyl dealers and and people who are extremely poor and I'm sitting here watching this this segment of the American population, urban population, that I haven't watched in 40 years, and I'm watching what's going on, and it's really fascinating because these people have no real advantages in life, and yet if you stop and talk to them, you can have a conversation like we're having, and
yeah,
there's a gap there. There's something missing, and and there that gap is being filled with narcotics or with other things, and which means that they're not going to be able to overcome that and get to a point where they can. I mean, this house is next to me. There've been squatters living there, and now the owners have finally done something about that. So, all I'm saying is that the world we live in is really interesting. It's extraordinarily interesting, and um, and if we choose to embrace that, then we're going to learn things that we can't learn by sitting in front of our computer. And
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, it's I'm constantly amazed.
Okay, I'll tell you, I'm sitting here and I've got this beside me. Can you see that?
I've heard of this, and so you like it?
I do like it. Uh, it's one of these ones I put something on LinkedIn about it during the week. It's each page is triggering something that I need to go off and research. So I'm reading it really slowly. Um, but he quotes Joseph Campbell early on, and he says, meaningful exploration involves making an active choice to pursue a course that requires effort and carries the risk of failure, what Joseph Campbell called a bold beginning of uncertain outcome. And I'm like, all right, I'm
Oh,
all in.
me too.
So
Me too.
yeah, that's it.
And yeah, well, it's great.
It's a fun read so far.
Um, so what you have projects that you're working on that you'd like to share anything about, things that are kind of expanding what you do in ways that you want to celebrate? Because I want to celebrate the things that you do that you feel like need some celebration and appreciation.
All right, well, thank you. I mean, it's a good question. I've got a couple of things I'm excited to be doing. Um, I'm holding a little contradiction in that they're not yielding any income, and I'm just taking this time to just go and explore them because I think they're the right things to explore.
Hmm.
Um, way back, I started my career in rural development. And it was in Ireland, so it was great. I look back on that time and actually I'll give you I literally have the guy's card here. I was in San Francisco last week. I was at an event and I met this guy from County Waterford and he was a surfer. And I shared with him that when I worked back there in rural development that we co-developed with the local community the first surf club.
Huh.
It was where he learned to surf.
How
And
about
so here I'm talking to him in San Francisco, and he's out in Ocean Beach regularly surfing, and he said that is crazy. He said that you so that was fun. So, but we did a lot of stuff, and back then it was all public-private partnership, and worked really really well. And so the the longer I've been here, I mean, I'm in the U.S. for 20 years now, so I'm a U.S. citizen, so I care about the country, um, and I'm particularly interested in looking around at what's happening in equivalent rural and regional areas here. And so I've started, to your point about getting up out from the computer, I've started to go out. So I've met with some rural and regional development groups and universities and small businesses here in the last few months. And again, they're doing amazing things and they're doing it in the absence of the kind of structure that we had when I was back in Europe.
Mhm.
So I reached back to my former colleagues back in Europe and I sort of said, "Hey, there's some amazing things happening over here and you're doing amazing things over there. Can we get a conversation going?" So both sides are really interested in doing that. So that's something that I have getting off the
That's
ground
fantastic.
and now sort of tapping back into some of the government or educational institutions on both sides and sort of saying, "Hey, is there an appetite here for conversation?" And suddenly realizing that not everybody knows each other, but actually a lot of them know each other. But they haven't sat down and had this kind of a cross ecosystem conversation before. So I'm in the middle of that, and that's fun. And that's bridging two things I'm very kind of interested in. Um, at the same time, I got involved in a collaborative group, primarily based back in Europe. Um, Back in March, we started talking just to say, hey, what would it be like if collaboration was more of a an operating system within companies than it currently is, like formal. Like we have agile and we have all these distant things, but actually, what if the typical MO of people in an organization was to collaborate and innovate? And where are the human angles on that? How do we bring healthy human systems into workplaces? So we are actively pulling the strands of that together and working on a business model for that. Again, that is risk versus reward is let's pull it together, let's start small, let's try and find some people to work with, and then hopefully that starts to yield. So that's the other thing that I'm working on that doesn't have an income stream, but I think is really interesting. And then third part of that is, I mean, I spent 20 years in corporate tech marketing, so I'm back now in talking to my peer groups purely really just having conversations around where like these gaps are that they're sensing and then introducing them to some of the themes. Sorry, my phone is pinging there. Some of the themes that are that we're seeing in this other work and asking the people in the tech space to sort of say which of these look interesting and if they want to have conversations. So that is, I think it's I'll call that classical Brenniger territory. That is going out to explore because I think there's something there, and it's enabling me to touch on all the spaces that I'm passionate about, and have fun sort of learning from the conversations. And then honestly, there's an element of hitting and hoping that there's a market for some of this in some way, shape, or form.
I think it's fantastic, and I
There's
think
definitely a hunger for it. Thanks, Ed.
yes, a hunger and a need, and uh, and that need has emerged just in the last 2 or 3 years. So it's not like
Yeah.
you're catching up on something. No, you're creating something. And I wish I was 20 or 30 years younger because of this very thing. Because what you're talking about is what I've been doing for 40 years, but without really seeing much movement. Is that because of my own lack of skills? I don't know. I don't even think about it in those terms. I just see that we're moving into a time of change, which is going to be fantastic,
Well,
beautiful.
I'm going to challenge you slightly. I wonder if you look back on all the people that you've talked to, how many of them you've nudged forward or encouraged forward or helped remove some barriers that are in their way, or I think
I agree.
you might look and say, hey, if things have been happening in the last 2 to 3 years, you've had a big hand in a lot of those, I'm sure.
Well, this is the way I measure this. It's it's wonderful to have an effect upon a person and them to feel appreciated. I mean, that's what the podcast has been in particular. But what I'm really interested in is seeing organizational change. And I don't, and it's the thing which is the hardest thing for me to deal with, which is why is it that people who know that there's a problem, know that their organization is broken, and can actually see a path forward, why is it that they're unwilling to step forward and do the work that is required? And I think it's because the system or the structure is so difficult to change that they feel like they are, um, you know, Sisyphus pushing the rock up the hill, and they never get to the top. And I, and I and I and it's almost as if things have to get worse before they can get better. But I am so surprised by what I'm seeing and the conversations I'm having. And I think the largest question out there is how are we going to financially survive as we go through all this change? I mean, you say you're
Mm,
doing things which don't have any definitive money coming in. I haven't been making a tremendous amount of money either, and yet we still
yeah.
continue to work away at it. So I'm not, I
Well,
am,
I think
I'm just
I'm going to be.
glad to have the opportunity.
Yeah, I will. I was. There's one. You asked me to be positive, but I'll also be frank. I can. I'm just thinking of the way to frame this. There's a paper from 1991 by a guy called James March at Stanford, and he wrote. It's called Exploration and Exploitation in Learning Organizations, and a lot of the underlying thinking underpins much of modern innovation, business innovation, and venture capital, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Strategizer wrote a book about 5 years ago called The Invincible Company, and the Invincible Company was the one that explored and exploited what they learned from the exploration. My take, and I know there's plenty of people who disagree with me here, is that we are over-indexed on exploitation right now. If the thing doesn't have a dollar sign attached to it, nobody wants to support it. There is a massive need for social innovation. I'll tell you an irony for me is that I grew up 30 miles from the border with Northern Ireland. Northern Ireland was resolved largely in the 1990s by the US government going in and sponsoring the reduction of the polarization there. So that works. That was social innovation. It works. We can do it at home as much as we can do it abroad. But we have to have the mindset that we see that the shorter term picture won't necessarily carry the big dollars, but longer term, absolutely it develops prosperity. And I honestly think we have forgotten that. And so it's not, Ed, I would almost be as bold as saying it's not that we have to discover a way to to monetize the work. I think there's full acknowledgement that there are people that are out there doing this kind of work because it's a vocation. And there's an acknowledgement that, let them do it. And I think that has to be addressed in the long term for a healthier outlook. Look,
I think what I see, in addition to what you just described, is that where once 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, people deferred to the experts, deferred to the bosses, and they did not think for themselves. They only followed the rules. And now and I think this is a product of COVID. Now they recognize that no one understands what is going on, and so they better come to grips with it themselves. They better think about it themselves. They better have conversations within themselves. They need to decide, excuse me, what is it I want for my life and for my family and for my community and for my industry. I think people are moving into that mindset where they're now thinking for the first time in their lives. And and I think all of that is
good thing.
stimulated by the conversations we're having.
Yeah, that's a good thing. If I had a wrapper for you on books, just a quick,
Yeah.
I read three books in one year that weren't uh, weren't intended to go together, but for me they went really well together. And I can show you. The,
Yeah.
this was the first one, which was uh, "Confronting Our Freedom" by Peter Block and Peter Kostenbaum.
Yeah. Gosh.
And I, I love this because they talked about being the agents of our own experience, which you just described there,
Yep.
and the reality that that's difficult. And at its root, they're basically saying when you are the agent of your own experience, you always have choice. However, they may not always be good choices,
Right.
but you do have choice, and that is freedom.
Exactly.
And what I loved about that was, and he goes in and he talks about he'd rather have a philosophy than a psychology, which I also thought was kind of fascinating. Um, but and they talked about, the emotional impact on people realizing that they have choice, but neither choices looks very appealing. And sometimes you get lucky and the choices are great. But I took it from there into this one, which was the power of giving away power. And what this one really was making the case that our freedom and independence is tied to the reality of interdependence. And so part of that choice of being the agent of our own experience is creating space for others to be the agents of their own experience. And that means a little compromise in there or a little negotiation. And then the last one, which I liked, and it's over there somewhere, is John Alexander's book, Citizens,
Yeah.
where he says that, you know, this, right? He goes with the progression from the Gilded Age, where we were kind of subjects, to the post-war age, where we were consumers, to now, where the decisions, choices are tough. So it's time to be a citizen, stand up, and be the agent of our own experience, which I think you articulated really nicely. So yeah, if we go on that journey, then I think the future's it's a little rough, but it'll be good.
What I'm surprised by are the people who um, lack higher degrees, who have no college and no advanced degrees, who respond to the things that I'm saying, and they say, yeah, and they're doing things in their communities. And
I had a brilliant conversation with somebody in the University of California system last week, who is responsible for regional development. And one of the issues they raised is that higher education has it's wandering into irrelevance for simply the reason that that education and where practical needs and practical intelligence and lived experience on the ground has been disconnected from it.
yeah,
And so they would agree entirely with what you're saying there is that, yeah, let's get back out and do things that meet people where they are.
that awareness that it's becoming irrelevant is the beginning of change.
Yeah.
And I mean, I've been talking in our family. We homeschooled our three children until they turned 16 when they went to community college for 2 years, and then they graduated, and went off to college. And but in doing that, I realized two things. One is that we should start treating children as adults as young as we can. And so that was I came to that conclusion when my oldest was 12, and that made a huge difference. And we're best. He and his brother and their sister and I are best friends now because we treated each other as adults. I didn't treat them as the overlord as their father. That's the first thing. The second thing is that we should start teaching entrepreneurial skills in elementary school, teaching the idea that children can try things and fail and recover and learn to do things so that by the time they're in middle school, they're actually creating online businesses that
Yeah.
support them and to
I,
compete for their college. And then it forces colleges to change because, yeah,
I love my son is 12, and if you visit our house, it's full of Hot Wheels.
yeah,
And so he buys and sells these on eBay as his little business, and he's good at it. So it's great. That's been fun to watch him figure out how to do that and invest his limited fund where it makes sense, and then be smart about how he gets return on that. And he's adamant on having 100% feedback rating from his customers, and yeah, so that's been
for
fun
him.
to do.
Um, probably should have him on the podcast
I can
because,
learn a few
I
things from
mean,
him.
that age group, his age group, the Gen Alpha age group, are going to be so different than the millennials and the Gen Zs and the Gen Xers and the boomers. They're going to be so different because they have watched all these problems emerge from how we have dealt with the digital culture. And so that's another place that I'm very optimistic.
Yeah. Good.
Okay.
Good. Good.
Well,
Hey,
it's been great to talk with you, and thank you.
get yourself out west sometime soon and we can
So,
Ed, always good to see you.
yeah, thank you, and have a great weekend.
Yeah, you too. You too.
Okay. Thank you for watching the Eddie Network podcast today. That conversation with John Morley, I hope, was a splendid one that kept your attention and uh, directed you to some resources and some ideas that may be beneficial to you. And I thank you for watching. Please hit the like button, subscribe both on YouTube and on Substack, and we'll see you next time here on the Eddie Network podcast. Bye bye.